I am Julia Hartman, 32 years old, a prosecutor in Charleston, who once believed that justice would always prevail if we were brave enough to stand for it. But today, I am not standing behind the prosecutor's bench. I am standing inside the defendant's box, sued by my own biological parents. The sound of the gavel echoed. The air inside the courtroom froze. My mother, Vivian Cross, tilted her chin slightly, a half-smile full of contempt. My father, Richard, crossed his arms, looking at me with a stranger's eyes. On the screen ahead, the words appeared clearly: Plaintiff Richard and Vivian Cross versus Ellen. Julia Hartman. A murmur rippled through the back rows. Is that her, the prosecutor who won the Ashbury case, and now she's being sued by her own parents? I saw my mother lean toward her attorney, Ethan Voss, a man famous for turning lies into speeches that could make juries cry. Vivian didn't bother to cover her mouth. Her voice was loud enough for me to hear. Show them that girl is nothing more than an opportunist wearing a moral mask. My heart pounded, but I kept my gaze steady. All my life, I have fought for justice. I just never imagined the day I'd have to fight against the very people who gave me life. I took a deep breath and said calmly, "You think you're deceiving a court? No, you're deceiving your own conscience, because what they didn't know was the judge presiding over today's trial, Marcus Holt, was once a student of my grandfather, Edward Langford, and he knew very well that I was not the person they tried to portray. Before I tell you how that courtroom completely turned around, hit like and subscribe. If you believe justice must be stronger than prejudice, if you believe that true family is defined by presence, not by blood, then stay with me. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to stand alone to defend the truth? Write one line below. I'll read it. And now, let's return to that courtroom, the moment when one single sentence silenced everyone. That riverside house in Charleston carried the scent of damp wood that season. Streetlights cast a soft amber glow on the old window frames. I was 8 years old, knees tucked on a velvet armchair, eyes fixed on the road where my parents had promised to return in just 2 hours. The clock's hands slid past 11. No car stopped at the gate. Grandfather Edward Langford appeared in his brown cardigan, holding 2 cups of warm milk. Bedtime. Quito, he said, his voice hoarse, yet gentle. I shook my head. I have to wait for them. He sat beside me, looking through the glass. Tonight. You've waited long enough. The breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of magnolia blossoms from the porch. I rested my head on his shoulder, and for the first time I understood. Some doors only open from one side. From that night on, my life followed his rhythm. Sundays were 3 courses: soup, roast, and tart. On Tuesdays, we read the newspaper together. On Fridays, he reviewed my short essays written in a leather notebook. He had strange little rules. Sit up straight when you tell the truth. Eat slowly, so you'll remember what you're grateful for. No one is truly orphaned if someone still listens. In the old kitchen, the crackling radio jazz mingled with the clinking of silverware. I memorized the smell of tomato sauce and the soft warmth of tea being poured Earl Grey into porcelain cups. Every night, the pendulum clock ticked steadily, the heartbeat of a home without parents, but full of presents. At Christmas, when I was 9, the school held a small recital. I had one solo line to sing. On stage, the spotlight hit my face so hard that the audience blurred into darkness. I scanned the rows. No one. Grandfather sat in the front, holding a small camcorder. He waved, smiling so kindly it softened the light itself. After the show, I ran to the parking lot. Engines hummed as other cars pulled away. Only he remained, folding his tripod into the car trunk. "You were wonderful," he said, patting my shoulder. I didn't answer. The lot was wet with rain. Mist, rising like pale smoke. In that moment, I thought, if they don't want to see me, I'll stop looking for them. From that day on, I stopped searching the audience. One spring morning, when I was 10, he spread out the Post and Courier on the table. "Read this," he said, pointing to an article about a land dispute. "What do you see as unfair?" I hesitated. "The strong side always wins." He nodded. "Then what is fairness? I didn't know." He smiled, not disappointed. "Fairness isn't always the outcome. It's how you act even when no one's watching." From then on, I read the paper every morning, learning to ask why. He taught me to jot small notes in the margins: who loses, who's heard. Once I asked, "How do you know who's right?" He replied, "The one who showed up." That line has stayed with me ever since. He called it showing up is evidence. One summer night, the power went out. Rien pour. He set a chessboard in the living room and lit a candle. "Your move first," he said. I lifted a knight, then a rook, and lost over and over. "Do you know why you lost?" I shook my head. "Because you only saw the next move, not the three after." We played again. I learned to see farther, not just across the board, but in life. Thunder cracked outside. He chuckled. "Justice is like that too, Julia. It isn't born shining. People have to make it shine." Then he tilted the candle toward me. The flame reflected in his eyes. "Justice isn't bright, it's made bright." When I turned 12, the refrigerator door was covered in achievements, certificates, perfect score essays. His little note saying, "Proud of you, E. L." The day my mother returned after 8 years. She brought expensive gifts and eyes that looked like a stranger's. She stayed less than 20 minutes. The scent of Chanel lingering on the sofa. When she left, Grandfather simply said, "Don't let someone's absence dull your own presence." I nodded. But inside, a small crack had formed, a longing to be chosen that never really disappeared. At 16, we had a tradition called Justice Sundays. Morning he cooked spaghetti. Noon I read him my first case analysis. Afternoon we turned on the old jazz radio, saxophone drifting through the open window. He underlined my essay with a blue pen, adding a note in the margin: "Emotions are data, not drivers." I still remember that sunlight cutting through the curtains, resting on his wrinkled hands as he wrote. I thought, if justice had a shape, it would have hands like his thin, but knowing exactly when to hold tight. That August, I got accepted into the pre-law program for gifted youth. I ran home to tell him, but he dozed off at his desk. On the table, beside his old pocket watch, lay a sealed envelope stamped with red wax placed neatly on top of a stack of bank files. He had never locked his drawers before. The envelope read, "For Julia when the time is right." I almost opened it, but he woke up suddenly. "Not yet, Julia," he said softly, smiling as he put it back. I didn't ask again. That night, the pendulum clock still swung, but for the first time in years, its rhythm made me uneasy. I didn't know then that envelope would change everything. At 17, I studied so late that my mind felt thick with tangled legal clauses. The desk lamp flickered. The oil was nearly gone. Before I could stand, a hand quietly twisted, opened the oil bottle, and fed a new flame. The light rose, soft and golden enough to illuminate the page and the wrinkled hand of my grandfather. "Edward Langford. Keep going, Julia," he said. "Don't study for grades. Study to understand how people protect one another." I asked, "Have you ever protected anyone?" "Grandpa," he smiled, the flame trembling against the corners of his eyes. "Sometimes, keeping the lamp from going out is protection." I looked at the lamp, then at his thin hand, spotted with time. Maybe I didn't learn law from books, but from the way he kept the light alive. In the days that followed, he taught me things no textbook ever mentioned. "Don't read the law with your eyes," he said. Read it with your ears. Listen to the way people stay silent. He told me about an old case. When he'd been a legal advisor, he once ignored the testimony of a woman who spoke slowly because of a speech impediment. A week later, new evidence surfaced. Her words had been true. I won that case, he said. But I lost to myself. When I asked, "How do you tell right from wrong when both sides have a point?" he replied, "Look at who's willing to lose something to tell the truth. The more someone stands to lose, yet still speaks, that's the one who's right." Every morning he read the paper while I took notes. We didn't just talk about law, we talked about the human heart. In those quiet mornings, he taught me that truth doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it's just a breath, if you're patient enough to hear it. That April, our school held a mock trial. I was chosen as prosecutor. The multi-purpose room smelled of varnish, the microphone buzzed, and cables sliced through the light like thin black threads. I prepared meticulously solid arguments. Clear evidence. Victory felt certain. When it came time for rebuttal, a boy from the opposing team brushed my shoulder and muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "An abandoned girl playing hero." Soft laughter spread quiet but sharp as glass. I froze for half a beat and lost my closing line. And with it, my score. Outside, the river wind cut cold, heavy with the salt of the tide. He was already there somehow, holding a gray wool scarf. "No, it's okay. No, you'll win next time." He simply handed me the scarf and asked, "When they laughed, did you hunch? Or did you stand tall?" I gripped the fabric and straightened my back. He nodded. Justice isn't about winning. It's about keeping your spine straight when you lose. I have never forgotten that line. By autumn, his cough had grown worse. That night, I cooked dinner, pumpkin soup, and toasted bread. His hands trembled as he sliced the loaf, crumbs scattered across the table. I reached to help, but he stopped me. "Let them fall. Julia, some things fall just to remind us we still have hands." He opened a small wooden box and took out a silver pocket watch. "It isn't worth much," he said, "but it's been ticking true for 40 years. I flipped the lid. Inside were 2 engraved letters, E. L. Keep it. When you're unsure of the right moment, listen to its rhythm. The second hand moved evenly, blending with his heavy breathing. I knew his time was running out, like the lamp oil the night before. That night, wind rose. The light went out. He was too weak to climb the stairs, so I helped him to the chair by the window. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, only candlelight remained. He looked at the flame and whispered, "Do you see? Julia, darkness never swallows the light. It only makes it shine clearer." I held his hand cold now, veins thin as threads. He smiled. "If you can still see the dark, it means you can still see it all. That's enough." I didn't know that would be the last time he spoke of light. Morning came. Sunlight slipped through the curtains. The house was so quiet I could hear the pocket watch still ticking. He was gone. The chair empty. The blanket folded neatly. Only the scent of mint from his cough drops lingered. On the table lay a red-sealed envelope beside the watch. Careful handwriting read, "For Julia when the time is right." I picked it up. The morning light glimmered on the wax seal, glowing like an ember. I didn't open it. I just sat there, letting the sunlight warm my hands as if it were his warmth I could still hold. Outside, sparrows chirped. A new day began. I whispered silently to myself, "From now on, the light belongs to me." I didn't yet know what that envelope contained, only that from that morning on, I was no longer the child waiting for someone to come home. I was 18. In my first year of college. One night, when the dorm room was dim, with only the soft glow of a desk lamp, I took out the red-sealed envelope I had kept for 3 years. The wax cracked with a faint sound. The paper inside was thin. the handwriting slightly trembling the strokes of my grandfather. Julia, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to see you grow. But I believe justice doesn't need witnesses, only someone to continue it. I read slowly, line by line. No inheritance. No instructions about money. Only questions. When you see something wrong, what will you do? When the truth costs you something, will you still choose to speak? He ended with one final line. Time is a circle. Justice is its center. Keep it in your heart, not in your hand. I folded the letter and placed it beside the silver watch. The second hand was still ticking. It turned out he hadn't left me wealth. He'd left me a way to see the world. Winter in New York. Glass towers reflected the gray sky and the yellow taxis running all night long. In that endless crowd, I was just another student, an old coat, an old suitcase, and a big dream. My first class was in a dome-shaped lecture hall. Professor Hartley threw out a question, which is easier to find fairness or justice. No one answered. I remembered my grandfather's words. The right one is the one who shows up. I raised my hand, voice trembling. Fairness can be measured by scales. Justice can't. It demands that a person stand in the middle of the line. The room fell silent. A few eyes shifted. No one clapped. But in that brief moment, I saw his light inside me. I worked part-time at the library, ate cold sandwiches, and studied every night until 2 a.m. in a city that never slept. I learned how to be alone without feeling lonely, because somewhere I could still hear the rhythm of his pocket watch beating in my coat. In the summer of my sophomore year, I was accepted into a law firm in Manhattan. During the first week, I witnessed a civil trial between an injured worker and a powerful corporation. I read the files all night. The evidence was clear. The law favored the worker. But by morning, everything had shifted. The corporation's lawyer introduced supplementary evidence, a fabricated report, crafted so flawlessly it couldn't be refuted. The judge struck the gavel. The case closed. The man lost. Outside, I stood on the cold courthouse steps. He walked past me, shoulders slumped. Wooden crutch cracked at one joint. He looked at me, not in anger, and just said, "Did you study law to win, or to understand losing?" That question followed me through the night. I had studied law to protect the innocent, but the system was teaching me how to lose, gracefully. By the end of that year, I was assigned to assist in a corporate fraud case. In the white neon office, my boss, Mr. Klein, said, "We don't need to prove anything. We just need the jury to believe." I looked at the file on the table. A witness statement had been altered. I asked, "Who authorized the change?" He shrugged. "We work for the company." "Not for the truth." I closed the file and pushed it back. "Then I can't work for the company." He smirked. "You'll lose your chance to advance." I replied, "Better lose a promotion than lose sleep." That night, I walked home across the Brooklyn Bridge. The river wind was cold. City lights shimmered on the water like countless shattered moons. I took out the pocket watch, listening to the steady tick, the heartbeat of my grandfather, blending with my own. Justice, I thought, doesn't live in courtrooms. It lives in the choices we make when no one's watching. A year later, I won my first case. A female employee was fired after reporting workplace harassment. I represented her a small case. No media coverage. When the verdict came, she cried, not for the settlement money, but because someone finally believed me. I smiled, but inside I felt hollow. No audience, no applause, just an empty room and white light cutting through the dust. I looked at the watch. The second hand still moved, and I understood justice isn't the cheer you hear. It's the silence you can stand in after choosing to be alone. One afternoon in May, I received a letter from Edward Langford's old law office in Charleston. Thick paper, a red wax seal, and only one line: "It's time for you to return." I sat quietly, listening to the sound of a train crossing the bridge in the distance. I knew returning to Charleston wasn't just going home. It meant returning to where justice had once begun, and where it would be tested one last time. I folded the letter and placed it in my coat pocket beside the watch. Justice had taught me how to stand firm, but Charleston would teach me how to face what I'd been standing against. The Charleston train station opened into a haze of steam and sea salt. The distant whistle stretched like memory itself. I stood in the middle of the platform, an old suitcase in hand, the cold crawling up my collar. The city hadn't changed much, only I had. Red brick buildings, moss-draped oak trees, creaking wooden porches. It all looked like childhood. Froze in umber. The taxi carried me along the riverfront. The river shimmered under the sunset, flowing past old mansions and familiar silhouettes. The brass sign of Whitaker and Lowell LLP reflected the fading light. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. A woman with silver hair and a low, steady voice rose to greet me. "Julia Hartman," she said. "I'm Ava Whitaker, your grandfather Edward Langford's former partner." His name struck me like the tick of a clock against my chest. I nodded, tightening my grip on the handle of my bag. The conference room glowed with daylight streaming through slatted blinds. A stack of files, a red seal, and a desk lamp still warm. Ava opened the first folder, her voice clear and deliberate. "All fixed assets, including the riverfront estate, investment portfolio, life insurance, and company shares are hereby transferred to the sole beneficiary, Julia Hartman." The room fell silent. The rustle of paper sounded like waves hitting the shore. And Ava continued, "All monthly stipends for Veronica and Trent Hartman will cease immediately upon this declaration." I stared at the document, my hands trembling, not because of the money, but because of how he had ended every compromise. Ava handed me another red-sealed envelope. "A personal letter for you." Inside were only a few lines. The handwriting shaky but firm. "Julia, money can't measure dignity. If you use it to buy silence, you'll lose yourself. Use it to do what's right, and you'll keep me forever." I folded the letter and placed it beside the silver watch. He hadn't told me how to spend the money. He'd told me how to spend my life. Well, Ava unlocked a steel cabinet. The sound clicked like a gavel. She placed a thick black folder in front of me. "Label it contingency file, V. L. Edward prepared this 2 years ago," she said. He knew what might come. Inside were dozens of bank statements, month after month, year after year, consistent transfers from E. Langford Trust to Veronica Hartman. The total over $800,000. Printed emails followed. "Dad, I just need to borrow $10,000. I'll pay it back soon. Never repaid." Text messages. "Grandpa, if I don't get the money this month, Trent will leave me." And hollow thank you notes. Pre-signed. Mass printed. Each page was a witness. Not for me, but for him. At the back was a handwritten note. "People may ask for kindness, but no one has the right to demand it forever." I closed the file. The paper felt cold as stone. This wasn't a will. It was a testimony of conscience. The news of the inheritance spread faster than expected. That afternoon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. The name Veronica appeared on the screen after 15 years of silence. I answered. Her voice came through soft, rehearsed. "Sugar over ice." "Julia. Sweetheart. There must be some mistake. Your father and I will talk to the lawyer." Just to clarify. I gripped the phone tighter. He didn't make a mistake. "Mother." He made a choice. A pause, then Trent's voice cut in. Rough and cold. "We raised you. We have rights." I replied. "Grandfather raised me. All you gave me was the Hartman name, the only thing I never chose." Silence. Then a long tone, followed by a message. "Don't forget. Blood is still blood." I stared at the screen, seeing my surname reflected in the glass old, but it no longer made me shake. When they said blood, what they really meant was blood money. 30 days later, while I was in the office, someone knocked. Miss Julia Hartman. Yes. He placed a thick envelope on the desk court documents from the Charleston County Court. The complaint read Plaintiffs Veronica and Trent Hartman. Defendant Julia Hartman. Allegation undue influence over an incapacitated person and misappropriation of estate assets. I read every line. My heartbeat didn't quicken, only chilled. The words were sterile, but they were enough to turn family into a legal battlefield. Ava interred. Skimmed the papers. Sayhed. This is exactly what Edward feared and prepared for best. I asked. Do they have a chance to win? She shrugged. If justice depends on luck, then yes. We looked at each other, neither of us smiling. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. Ava and the legal team gathered witnesses: Edward's personal physician, his old neighbor, his colleague from the Court of Appeals. Every one of them agreed to testify. One night, I returned to the riverfront house. Moonlight streamed through the windows, spilling across the wooden desk where he used to write. The silver watch lay at the center. Its ticking continued. Even though he no longer could, I reopened his letter. Justice is not revenge. It's light. But sometimes, you must carry that light into the storm. The river wind rose, rustling the paper. I looked up as Ava's voice called from the hallway. Julia. A message from the court. Your case has been assigned to Judge Marcus Ellery. I froze. That name, Marcus Ellery. He had once been Edward Langford's clerk, trained under him for 10 years. I turned toward the window, where the moon shimmered over the river. Tomorrow, the man who had learned justice from my grandfather would judge his legacy. That morning, the Charleston sky looked scrubbed with ash. Light spilled unevenly across the porch of the County Supreme Court, smudged like oil stains. I walked through the grand hall, my footsteps echoing. The scent of oak wood and old paper made my heart skip. Inside Courtroom 3, Judge Marcus Ellery was already seated. Silver hair, upright posture, eyes deep and steady, exactly as he'd appeared in the old photograph beside my grandfather. He looked up and gave a brief nod. No smile, no expression, only fairness, carved into his face. Veronica and Trent sat at the left table, dressed entirely in black. Veronica had chosen a dress trimmed with white lace, half mourning, half manipulation. Their attorney, Richard Palmer, stacked his files like fortress walls. I sat across from them with Ava Whitaker. My fingers brushed the silver pocket watch in my coat. The ticking was steady, slow, firm, unshaken. The court bell rang 3 times. Ellery spoke. His voice calm, but commanding. Court is now in session. Case Hartman v. Hartman, contestation of the last will and testament of the late Edward Langford. A moment of silence followed, only the scratch of pens signing and the faint rhythm of my breath blending with the ticking in my pocket. Palmer rose. His tone sharpened like metal. Your Honor, this is not a story of greed. It is a story of a mother robbed of her final chance at love. He glanced at me, tilted his head slightly, then turned to the jury. Veronica Hartman, a woman estranged by her father, now betrayed by her own daughter. Julia Hartman manipulated her grandfather during his final years, influencing him to rewrite his will. Veronica dabbed her eyes. A perfect tear fell right on cue, choreographed like theater. Palmer continued, voice rising. Justice cannot remain silent when blood betrays blood. The word blood coiled around my neck like a tightening wire. They weren't suing for money. They were suing history itself. Palmer called the first witness an old neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. In her voice trembling, Mr. Edward always looked so sad when he mentioned his daughter. Next came distant relatives I had never met. He isolated himself after Julia moved in. One said he stopped attending church festivals. No one mentioned he'd stopped because of failing health. Palmer projected a photo Edward in the garden, Head bowed. The light dim. A lonely man, consumed by the only person he trusted. It was all artfully staged imagery. Pauses. Tone. I listened. Unmoving. Ellery occasionally tapped his pen. Eyes unreadable. He neither defended nor condemned. He simply observed. I remembered my grandfather's words. Justice doesn't rush. It waits to see who can stand the longest. Then it was my turn. I rose. Took a breath. The sunlight from the tall window cut straight across my face. My hand trembled slightly, but the touch of the watch steadied me. Miss Hartman. Ellery said. Do you wish to make a statement? Yes. Your Honor. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to talk about presence. The room fell silent. I continued. Voice calm. Since I was 3 months old. I lived with Mr. Edward Langford. He gave me education. Shelter. And taught me that justice isn't law itself. It's how we use the law to protect the weak. I spoke of our late-night studies. Of the pocket watch, always resting on the desk. He wasn't a man easily influenced. He taught me to question him even when I was wrong. He once told me, if you must teach your children to be kind, it means you've failed somewhere. He didn't fail. Your Honor, he simply chose the right person to continue. Palmer interrupted Miss Hartman. You've worked in the legal field. Correct. Yes. I'm a prosecutor. Meaning, you possess the knowledge to manipulate a will. No. It means I know the law well enough not to. Ellery's pen paused midair. He looked up and gave a subtle nod. I didn't take anything from him. I said quietly, I only kept what he had already chosen. Palmer advanced, the scent of mint and arrogance filling the space. You claim he was lucid, but he was 87. Wasn't he? Yes. And he was prescribed sedatives, yes. Under medical supervision. Did he ever forget names? Only the names of those who left him. A murmur rippled through the room. Palmer's jaw tightened. Miss Hartman. Did you have a financial motive? No. But you inherited $3 million. I inherited a legacy. Not money. And that legacy is the justice he left behind. He gave a cold laugh. Tell me, does justice pay taxes? I met his gaze. If it did, I've been paying mine for 32 years. The air thickened. Ellery tilted his head slightly, motioning for him to continue. Palmer switched tactics. Then why? Miss Hartman, do you believe your parents don't deserve it? I never said they don't. I said my grandfather waited for them and they never came. Do you have proof? Yes. But the real evidence is the empty chair at his dinner table for 32 years. The sentence dropped like a hammer. No one spoke. Palmer sat down. Lips pressed thin. Ava rose. The defense calls Dr. Ramos. The elderly doctor shuffled forward. Spine bent but voice firm. I was Mr. Langford's personal physician for 15 years. He was fully lucid up until his death. Ava asked, do you have records? Yes. Signatures. EKG reports. Cognitive tests. He used to joke that his memory was better than his nurse's. Then came Margaret Chen, the attorney who drafted the will. I met Mr. Blank, Edward 6 times over 2 months. He arrived each time with a prepared list, every clause, every name. He wished to end his daughter's financial dependency so she could learn to stand on her own feet. Palmer cut in. Can you prove, Miss Son? Hartman had no influence. Yes, because I don't allow anyone in the drafting room, not even Julia. I have the camera footage. Ava opened her laptop. The projection flickered onto the wall, Edward Langford. Sitting upright. Voice raspy but firm. This is my will. No one forced me. I leave everything to the one who stayed. The audio crackled. Then faded. The courtroom held its breath. Justice doesn't need promises. His voice lingered. It only needs a signature dated right. Ellery set his pen down. His voice was steady, resonant. The court will recess for 1 day to review supplementary evidence. Both parties may submit additional materials before 9 a.m. tomorrow. Veronica gave a soft sob, pretending to faint. Trent caught her a little too dramatically. Palmer bowed stiffly to the judge, his glance slicing toward me like a knife. I rose, a hand still around the watch. Ellery looked directly at me and said quietly, "Just loud enough for me alone. I was once Edward Langford's clerk. He never wrote a single unnecessary word. Tomorrow, we'll see what he left for the world." I froze. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, dust glimmering like late snow. The ticking in my palm halted for half a beat, as if time itself was holding its breath with me. Tomorrow, justice would be read aloud in the voice of the man who once learned it from him. Charleston lay under a blanket of fog that morning. The courthouse steps were damp stone. The corridors were packed with reporters. The clicks of cameras, the tapping of shoes, and the scent of cold coffee blended into that familiar chaos of Judgment Day. I walked through the crowd, chin held high, fingers wrapped around the silver watch. Its ticking was steady and silent, like the heartbeat of the man who had once kept time for me. Courtroom 3 felt heavier than the day before. No one spoke loudly. Yet every gaze was fixed on the small USB drive resting on the judge's desk. Ellery was already seated, hands clasped before him. His voice came low and deliberate, like a bell tolling underwater. The court reconvenes for Hartman v. Hartman. Today, a special archive document has been located in the files of the late legal advisor, Edward Langford. A murmur rippled through the room. Palmer shot me a cold look. Veronica pressed her lips together. Trent glanced around, lost, unaware of what was about to unfold. Ava touched my shoulder gently, whispering, "Stay calm. The truth always finds its own voice." Ellery took out a pale yellow envelope, its edges folded and worn. "This is a letter Mr. Langford wrote to Mrs. Veronica Langford, but never sent. It was found in his private records, which I kept when I served as his clerk." The room went utterly still. He removed his glasses and began to read Veronica. "You may never read these lines, but I write them anyway. I am not angry, only regretful. Regretful that you always chose what was easy over what was right. You call it love, but you forget that love is not a demand. I only wished you'd come home once, not to ask for something, but simply to ask how I've been." His slow voice echoed through the cold courtroom. Veronica lowered her head, tears falling onto her lace handkerchief. "If one day you understand that love doesn't disappear, it only arrives too late, then you'll know why I left everything to Julia." Ellery's voice cracked slightly on the final word. He folded the letter and placed it on the bench. No one spoke. The only sound was the tick of the watch on my table, perfectly in sync with my heartbeat. Love doesn't disappear. It only arrives too late. Palmer suddenly stood, breaking the silence. "Your Honor, we object. An unsent letter holds no legal weight. We request tangible evidence instead." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick bundle of papers, bank receipts, handwritten notes, and records of loans between Edward and Veronica. These documents show that Mr. Polygon Langford transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars to his daughter, proof that Julia Hartman exploited her grandfather to rob her mother of her rightful inheritance. He strode to the bench, laying each sheet down as if throwing knives. Veronica bowed her head, wearing her rehearsed grief. Ava leaned toward me, whispering, "It's time." I stood and walked to the podium. "Your Honor, permission to respond." Ellery nodded. From my folder, I pulled a printed copy of the same documents Palmer had just shown, but highlighted in tiny text at the bottom. "The recipient of this loan hereby waives all future claims or inheritance rights to the lender's estate." I projected the enlarged clause on the courtroom screen. "These are not loan receipts," I said evenly. "They are signed waivers of inheritance rights." executed 20 years ago by Veronica and Trent Hartman. The courtroom erupted. Palmer froze mid-gesture. Paper still in hand. Mouth half open. Sometimes the weapon you hold to threaten others, I said quietly, is the very blade that cuts you. Ellery gave a small nod. Noted for the record. Ava murmured beside me. Now they've lost more than the case, they've lost their masks. Ellery turned the USB drive in his hand, the metal glinting under the lights. I have also received an audio file, recorded by Mr. Edward Langford himself, dated June 12th, 2020. It was part of the verification materials for his will. He plugged it in. The speakers hissed softly. Then came that deep, a familiar voice. Marcus, if one day I'm gone, and they return to claim what they never earned, let Julia speak through action. Not tears. The girl doesn't need to prove love, she never left me. Remember, this justice isn't a weapon. It's light. And if I must choose, I choose light to stand with her. Static followed. Veronica broke into sobs. This time stripped of rehearsal. Trent turned away from the cameras. Palmer stared down, trembling, still pretending to take notes as if he could rewrite time. The room went silent again. A reporter's whisper leaked in from the hall before being hushed. Ellery switched off the speakers. The recording will be entered into evidence, he said softly. I sat down, clutching the watch. It felt as if the hour hand was moving faster, as though part of my grandfather's heartbeat had returned to life inside this courtroom. Palmer forced himself upright, voice brittle. Your Honor, my client only seeks fairness. Mrs. Veronica has been abandoned. Wounded. Veronica interrupted, her tone cracking with bitterness. I just want what I deserve. The entire courtroom turned. Palmer hissed. You shouldn't. But she was past control. All my life I watched him love her more than me. I'm his real daughter. He deserved to pay for that. Julia doesn't deserve a single cent. Her words crashed against the stone walls like echoes of the truth itself. Trent pulled at her arm. Too late. Ava rose calmly. Your Honor. The defense rests. The plaintiff has just confirmed a financial and emotional motive incompatible with her claim of justice. Ellery struck the gavel. Statement recorded. The court will consider it in deliberation. The truth doesn't need witnesses, only those willing to reveal themselves. Veronica collapsed into her seat. Palmer's hand trembled. I watched them, not with triumph, but with a hollow quiet, like an old wound sewn shut with no blood left to bleed. Ellery gathered his notes. His tone, solemn court is adjourned for deliberation. The verdict will be delivered tomorrow morning at 9. The gavel hit 3 times, echoing deep and final. Reporters flooded the hallway. Microphones flashing. One called out, Miss Julia, do you have any comment? I paused on the marble stairs beneath the skylight. Justice doesn't need to shout, I said. It just needs to stand tall. They fell silent as shutters clicked in a frenzy. The river breeze drifted through the corridor windows, carrying the salt of the tide. I opened the pocket watch. The second hand glided perfectly in rhythm. For the first time, I realized it didn't just measure time, it measured the distance between people and the truth. Inside the courtroom, Ellery remained seated. He looked at the golden envelope and the USB drive on the bench. The last light of day streamed through the glass, etching a thin line of brightness across his face. He whispered softly to himself, Edward, you taught me how to see light in the dark. Tomorrow morning, I'll return it to her. Charleston's morning gleamed like freshly polished glass. Dew clung to the courthouse steps, reflecting the silhouettes of reporters lined in formation. Inside, courtroom, 3 smelled of new paper, cold coffee, and anticipation. Judge Marcus Ellery was already seated stern. Composed, he struck the gavel once, short and sharp. The court reconvenes for Hartman v. Hartman. Today, the verdict will be announced. I drew a deep breath. The silver watch in my hand kept ticking steady. Calm. Ava leaned closer, whispering, "Don't worry. Everything's right where it should be." Ellery opened the folder before him. Voice low but clear. "Before the court delivers judgment, let us recall the foundation of the law. A valid will must satisfy two conditions: capacity and free will. Both have been reviewed." He paused, eyes scanning the courtroom. No one moved. Light streamed through the window, cutting a single bright line across the judge's bench. "First," Ellery continued, "regarding capacity. Based on medical records and the testimony of the drafting attorney, Mr. Edward Langford was of sound mind when he signed his testament. Second, regarding undue influence, the court finds no evidence that Miss Julia Hartman controlled or coerced Mr. Prost Langford. Instead, we observe a consistent pattern. The heir was present, caring, and maintaining a genuine connection, while the plaintiffs remained absent and financially dependent." Palmer inhaled sharply. Veronica lifted her head, eyes flickering with fear. Ellery turned to the final page. The financial transfers between Mr. Rated, Edward and Mrs. Veronica include a clause stating, "The recipient hereby waives all rights of inheritance." This was not assistance. It was a binding agreement. I looked up, voice as firm as marble. "Justice does not choose blood, it chooses evidence. Therefore," Ellery declared, slowing his tone, "the court finds the will valid. The petition filed by Veronica and Trent Langford is hereby dismissed. All assets of Edward Langford shall be transferred to Julia Hartman." In accordance with the final testament, the gavel struck once, echoing up to the vaulted ceiling. Reporters held their breath. I closed my eyes, hearing only the sound of my own heartbeat. Between the silence, "Furthermore," Ellery added, "the plaintiffs are ordered to cover all court costs and legal fees incurred by the defense." Veronica leaned forward, whispering, "No, this can't be." Palmer said nothing. He only bowed his head. Trent glanced around, searching for a way out. Ellery set down the gavel. "Court is adjourned." No applause. No cheers. Only the creak of old wooden chairs as people stood. Ava touched my shoulder gently. "You did it," I whispered. "Not me. Him." Ellery met my eyes and gave a small nod. "Miss Hartman," he said, "use what you have to create light." I smiled softly. No tears. I knew he wasn't speaking of money, but of duty. "The greatest victory," I said quietly, "is not needing anyone to lose for you." The courthouse hallway exploded with camera flashes. Reporters crowded both sides. Microphones raised. "Miss Hartman, how do you feel after the verdict?" I stopped on the marble steps and looked straight into the lens. "Justice isn't about winning or losing. It's the order that should never have been broken. What will you do with your inheritance?" I took a slow breath. "I'm founding the Hartman Langford Fellowship, a free legal program for the elderly, helping them write their wills and protect their rights. Because too many people carry love in their hearts but never get the chance to put it on paper." The flashes brightened. Ava smiled. I nodded, thanking them, and walked through the crowd. Late afternoon. Magnolia Cemetery. The sky faded pale, sunlight slanted through the trees. I laid a bouquet of white flowers beside his headstone. The watch in my hand still ticked steady. "Familiar." "Grandpa," I whispered, "the verdict's been read. I'm not happy, I'm at peace." I opened the watch, watching the second hand glide. "The clinic opens next month. We'll help others write down their love before it's too late." The breeze brushed through my hair, carrying the scent of soil and magnolia blooms. I looked up. The sunlight fell across his stone, a single bright line, like the exclamation mark of destiny. Time doesn't erase the truth. It only teaches us to face it calmly. I stepped back and placed his old letter inside a small wooden box. On the lid, I wrote one line, "To remember." not to resent. Beyond the cemetery gates, church bells rang in the distance. Charleston melted into a soft Holden dusk. I closed the watch gently and turned toward the river. Tomorrow, I whispered, I'll begin again the way you wanted. Morning in Charleston was thin with mist. The silver sign Hartman Langford Fellowship hung above the glass window, letters catching the pale sky. Inside, the space was modest, light wooden desks, shelves of files, and a pot of tea. Ava adjusted the white flower pinned to her jacket and smiled at me. We're ready, she said. An elderly woman pushed the door open, clutching an old cloth bag. Behind her was a boy of about 16. I stood. Good morning, ma'am. She introduced herself as Martha Dooling. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were bright. I want to write what I never had the chance to write for my husband. Now, it's for the children. Love only needs to be written down at the right time. We opened her file. A simple list of assets, a small house, some savings, and a walnut piano she called the heart of the home. I asked, who will receive the piano? She smiled. The boy. He can play his grandfather's song without missing a note. We drafted the will who receives what, when, and under what care. I read each clause slowly aloud. Ava double-checked the details. The boy stood still, every word landing on the wooden floor and dissolving into the grain. When it was signed, Mrs. Martha held my hand. You work quickly but warmly, like pouring tea without spilling. I pointed to the final line. The personal message of the testator. She wrote, carefully and slowly, don't let the piano stay silent. A will isn't just a right. It's how the heart teaches continuity. That afternoon, I visited the courthouse. Judge Ellery's office overlooked the river. The tide shimmered like a sheet of pale fabric being slowly turned. Your Honor, I came to thank you for telling me to create light, I said. He set down his papers and removed his glasses. Light doesn't belong to anyone. It only passes through those who stand still long enough. He paused, looking at me. You've stood still long enough for the light to find its rightful keeper. I reached into my bag and handed him an old photograph Edward and me in the garden. The day I was accepted into law school, he used to say, the right thing doesn't shout. Ellery nodded. And that courtroom, it was only the echo of that truth. We sat quietly, listening to the water brush, the bridge supports. I realized many trials end, but their resonance remains where people learn gentleness through winning and losing. That night, I returned to Edward's house. The study still smelled of linseed oil and old paper. On the shelf sat the box labeled, to remember, not to resent. I opened it, took out a new sheet of paper, and wrote Grandpa. Today, we helped an old lady write what she feared would be too late tomorrow. I understand now love doesn't need to be protected by walls, only by the right words, and someone patient enough to read them. I folded the letter, placed it back inside, and added one more line on the lid. Read and will act. The silver watch in my palm vibrated gently with each step. Its ticking measured more than time. It measured the width of a heart that learns when to let go. Letting go at the right time doesn't shrink. Love it makes it fit the hands that receive it. Night spread along the riverbank. I stood on the porch, tasting the salt wind. The city shimmered with soft golden lights, tiny lanterns in the eyes of those finding their way home late. My phone buzzed an email from Ava. A photo of Mrs. Lesh. Martha beside the piano. The boy's fingers touched the keys. The first note wavered, half a beat off, then fell perfectly into rhythm. Below the photo was a caption, the piano isn't silent anymore. I closed my eyes, hearing the imagined music blend with the sound of water. Somewhere, I knew, Edward was smiling. Justice had left the courtroom and entered the kitchens of small homes. I opened the watch, watching the second hand past 12 like a nod. Tomorrow, I'll open the doors 10 minutes early. I'll brew the tea before the clients arrive. And I'll hang a new note beside the front desk. Love, please. Write it down. And if anyone asks whether I still hold resentment, I'll answer no. My hands are too full, holding what's worth keeping. I close the door behind me, leaving the wind outside. Tomorrow, new doors will open, and light will need someone to carry it forward.